Aurelia, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. My SCA name is Aurelia Lemoniana. Um, my well, if you had asked me like 3 years ago, I would have said that my primary interest was in first century Roman clothing. But since then, I've gotten really interested in the clothing kind of the Bronze Age Mediterranean in general, because it all fits together in a lot of really interesting ways. And one of the things that became really interesting to me is how, some of the garments are very different and very culture specific, but then some of them are almost identical. It's just that the way that they're styled will vary, kind of depending on exactly where you are and who you are. And that's, really interesting, if you're just interested in the study of the cultures involved. But, for practical SCA purposes, that means that there are ways that you can just kind of make, one basic bag shape, like literally a rectangle of fabric. And by swapping out your accessories, you can have like, outfits that are, at least, passable for like a bunch of different cultures, and you can style them in a bunch of different ways. And it's just really fun and cool and really expands your wardrobe. And so that was kind of where this class happened. I'm going to continue. Just a second. I want to move that window where it's not going to mess with my scroll bar. So I'm going to at the end of the class, I'll go ahead and drop the link into the chat. Um, but in the meantime, I'm just kind of going to do the presentation, sort of working through the handout. And if you have questions, we can kind of go along. Okay, first of all, this isn't a comprehensive overview of Egyptian, Roman, or Greek clothing. This is focusing specifically on the what's called a bag tunic. The reason why I'm calling it a bag tunic or a tube tunic is because different cultures use a whole bunch of different words to describe what's basically the same garment. And different cultures have like different, like, for example, in Greek, the primary difference about what you call it, whether it's a peplos or a chiton, depends on if it's made out of wool or linen. In Rome, if it has an overfold, it's a peplos. And if the sleeves are sewn across the top, it's a tunica. And if you have the gap sleeves where you have button, button, button all the way down, it's a chiton. So to just not, you know, force you to use Roman derived words, which are obviously the correct ones. Um, and that was a joke because I have a Roman persona and I have to. Or get tied up in language. I'm just going to use the modern terms. Um, you know, so historically there were three methods for making a bag or tube tunic. The first was to cut and sew panels of fabric together. The second was to fold the fabric and sew it up or pin it. And the third was to weave the entire thing on a loom, trim neckline, trim and all. Some cultures did all three, sometimes some only used one method. Sometimes it depends kind of exactly when you're talking about. And then for this class, I'm not a weaver, so I'm going to focus on the ones that involve taking already made fabric and sewing it. For all of these, it does not matter if the selvage edge is at the top and bottom or on the sides. Basically, there you're going to base your choices on your height and the desired length and width of the tunic. And then I have some tips about how to make pin-on things, how to mark your pins if you're pinning or if you're sewing your things up. And I really want to emphasize this, that when choosing fabric, you want something that's a mid to lightweight, and then add more layers if you need them. Because because if you think about it this way, if you have, like, say, handkerchief weight linen, which is usually like at least, or very thin cotton, if you're wearing all of the layers, which I encourage people to do because it works better, you have 2 ounce and 2 ounce on top of 2 ounce. Well, that's 6 ounces of fabric. So at that point, you're wearing as much as you would if you were wearing a single canvas tunic. So if you start out with 6 ounces, then that's 6 ounces and 6 ounces and 6 ounces. And you're sitting there wondering why you're sweating because everybody told you how cool and comfortable Greek clothing was. You know, I will also say that bed sheets are good for practice, but they tend to be a little bit stiff and draped kind of weird. So I would use them for practice and not for your final product. Old linen tablecloths are however, can be really excellent. Okay, so how to make a bag tunic. I have detailed instructions, enough that I don't want to waste everybody's time just reading them out loud for you. You can kind of see the pictures, and if anybody has a question that involves my directions not making any damn sense, please feel free to ask them at any point during the class or contact me later. Okay, and then this is the other method of doing a bag tunic that involves cutting a keyhole neckline. Now, you'll notice that what they're showing as the seam where the two pieces of fabric are sewn together are actually like across are above the neck hole. And then the neck hole is actually entirely in the front panel. And when I saw that, I was like, that makes no sense. Like that makes no sense. Like that's just weird, right? Then I actually did it. And what happens if you have a bag tunic and you put your neck hole all the way in the front is when gravity makes your neck hole pull backwards, it's pulling everything just like maybe half an inch or an inch backwards onto your shoulders, and it fits perfectly. And yeah, it's just like one of those things that you sit there and you go, dude, these people like just had it figured out.
Just
Because
laugh at
this worked.
anyone who scoffs at those people didn't know what they were doing. And then you do what they did and you go, oh, no, they knew.
Yeah, exactly. And, also it's like, when you're doing the same style over and over and over again, eventually you figure out what works. Yeah. Okay. And then you have a tube tunic, which the difference, in case you were wondering, is that with what I'm calling a bag tunic, the arms go out the sides. And on a tube tunic, the arms actually go out the top edge of the fabric.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever noticed that before.
Yeah. Yeah. Different cultures did them different ways. And yeah, they both work perfectly well. It's just one gives you a wider silhouette and one gives you a narrower silhouette.
So going back to maybe you're going to get into it further, but I when I see examples of this style in like statuary and such, you see a lot of the very columnar kind of lines, like folds.
Yeah.
Um, is is there, have you tried anything like that before?
Um, I've I think that that is based on my own experimentation. I think that that is what happens when you put it on and then you take some time to like really play with your pleats, both above and below the tunic. Because one of the things that we do know is that like when you're talking about like draped garments, like having the pleats be like neat and arranged is like kind of the important, it is kind of like what you like do to be like well dressed, right? It's kind of like the difference between like today, if you saw somebody and like they're wearing like a button down shirt and a pair of jeans, and the jeans are pressed and the shirt's ironed and it's tucked in and they've got a belt and everything's good, versus somebody who's wearing jeans that haven't been washed for that are on day 4, and a polo with a spaghetti sauce stain on it, right? It's that kind of a thing. So like and this runs through the whole period. Like you've that these types of garments were being worn, like you have Sappho in the Bronze Age like writing about how you can always spot country girls because of, how clumsy the pleats on their clothing are, right? And at the end of it, you've got Tertullian, who's like griping about, oh, yeah, you have all these people running around with their, like tunics, carefully pleated in four, carefully arranged in four pleats, right? And that's just, how it is. That's something that kind of works on for me because, I tend to default to unsophisticated slob anyway. But I'm getting better. And then this is just how you make a tube tunic with an overfold. Okay, so now we're going to kind of run through the culture specific stuff. And we're going to start in Greece because if you like it, it's probably Greek. That was the title I came up with because there's a lot of things that people do that it's like, and they're like, oh, it's Roman. And it's like, no, this is a Greek style. Did Romans sometimes use this style? Yes. But did they know it thinking, oh, I'm wearing this cute Greek thing? Yes. Yes, they did. Okay, so basically for this, you've got the most common style is a tube tunic, although you will also see women wearing bag tunics. And men's tube tunics typically didn't have an overfold. And then once you're getting into women's clothes specifically, they can be either sewn or pinned. And then men's clothing is more often pinned. And then the big difference comes in with jewelry and with kind of the accessories, because male jewelry, you're pretty much just looking at functional pins, finger rings, maybe earrings and headbands. Female jewelry, you've got a lot more variation. And then for hairstyles and headwear, I'm not really going to get into the male styles because if you have short hair, that's more of a commitment. And usually men will be either wearing a large brimmed straw or felt hat or a I'm sorry, I had chemotherapy this morning and the anti-nausea meds are making me a little bit spacey.
Apologies needed. You're doing just fine.
Okay. So anyway, now women's hairstyles were, and this is actually one of the big difference between Greek hairstyles and Roman hairstyles, is that with Greek hairstyles, it's pretty much like messy bun getting shit done. So you have just kind of a low bun in the back of the head, or you might have a head wrap or hairnets. If you want details, I strongly recommend going to Janet Stevens's YouTube channel. The other cool thing that you can do is you can take your tunic with an overfold and have the back part of the overfold so you can flip it up over your head for to shade your head, like say you're in court and all of a sudden you just need a little bit of extra shade. And there's also a really wacky thing called the tedagon, which is a roof, which can be worn either as a face veil or you can flip it up over your head and wear it more for shade, kind of as a hat. And in fact, in the Byzantine period, it stops being a face veil and becomes a hat. And I mention this specifically because if you're out party hopping at a war, or if you're at a site that's like really dusty and really nasty, something like that will either keep your nose warm or keep you from chewing dust for days. So those are all headwear options. And there's a picture of somebody wearing their tedagon flipped up. And for men and women, you're talking about usually fairly simple fabric belts or a very thin leather belt. And for women, you also have a sort of it's not exactly a belt, but it's the breastband or harness that kind of keeps the tunic under control and also creates a sleeve effect. And this is a style that a lot of people in the SCA like. And and if you enjoy wearing it, I highly recommend it. And here are some instructions that my friend Lady Astra Corinthia has developed. Although I've seen a lot of, really cool and elaborate styles that other people have developed, that may or may not be, basically, SCA-isms, but they look cute. And if you have a way that you like doing it, rock on with your bad self. And then this, if you want to get super elaborate, is woven out of gold wire. And then it has hooks and eyes, and you just put it on over the whole thing. It's pretty nifty. And then kind of on top of everything, you have, a variety of wraps and mantles and, different kinds of colors. And then I have a couple other suggestions for if you want to make something that is more distinctively Greek as opposed to a garment that the garment itself is kind of a blank canvas, and then you can, style it in different ways. So, what are good colors? You've got your blacks, your reds, your yellows, your blues, your greens, and your purples. And your cloth is a natural color, and especially if you're doing more like Bronze Age Greek or early classical Greek, Murex purple and Murex blues were still coming in from Carthage, and those will actually give you like true deep light fast color fast blues and purples on linen As will indigo will also give you like a real blue on linen that will last. So, not everything was white or needs to be white, although I personally am a fan of natural colored linen because I think it makes a good contrast with a lot of other colors. Um, can I make it out of a sari? Yes, but the better way to do it is to cut off the fancy part at the end and the borders. If you're using it to make a mantle or a wrap or a really big veil, you can leave the borders in place and cut the sari down to the proper length. I need to go back and revise because also Turkish bath towels can be really good for this and work really well, especially for earlier period Greek styles of garb. And then we have Roman. Emperor Augustus doesn't want you to know that togas and stolas are optional. The title comes from the fact that as a Roman persona, one of my big, like, why do people think this? Is people who are like, well, I don't want to wear Roman because then I have to wear a toga and dear God, or I have to wear a stola and stolas are big and frumpy. And the answer is, or you could be like Romans and not wear it if you don't wanna. Okay, so what were they wearing? The most common type, and this is for men and women, has a simple horizontal slit or opening for the neckline, just straight across the top of the shoulders. Tunics for men were almost always sewn across the top. And for women, you will very occasionally see pinning. And more often you'll see basically in what, and you'll see like the gap sleeve tunic where you have like basically buttons almost that are sewn along the top edge. Tunics with an overfold were worn by girls who were worn, and that's one of those things where people will go, I'm wearing a tunic with an overfold, I'm wearing Roman, and it's like, are you a literal girl? Like a girl who is too young to get married? Then no, it's really not something that an adult woman would have worn in ancient Rome. In the same way that boys had purple stripes or a purple border if they were wearing a toga for a formal occasion, would have a purple border. It's so this person is a literal child and needs to be, you need to watch your mouth and your behavior around them because this is a kid. So the stola specifically is a tube tunic that had straps going over the shoulders. It's not a fashion item. The purpose was to mark a, quote unquote, respectable married woman when she went out in purpose. It was always worn not as a cute sundress, but over your clothes and was made out of thick, typically red wool. And like it really kind of came in in like the middle of the 1st century BCE. And by like the middle of the 1st century CE, it was gone. It was worn for like less than 100 years. And then the toga kind of, as it got bigger and fancier, kind of became like, went from being like a tuxedo to being like a to being like, you went from like being like a suit to being like a tuxedo, where it's like you only wear one 2 or 3 times in your life and it's probably rented. But enough for those rants. So Roman men, not a lot of jewelry. Roman women, knock yourself out. And Roman men, again, you're looking at pretty simple hairstyles. For women, you have these like gorgeous, elaborate, almost like sculptural hairstyles. And again, if you go to Janet Stevens's YouTube, she is, by the way, she's one of my heroes. She's a professional hairdresser who went to a show on ancient Roman sculpture, and they had this bust and it said, oh yes, this is clearly a wig because you couldn't actually do this on human hair. And she looked at it and was like, I can tell you exactly how to reproduce that style using real human hair. And then like set about like researching what the equipment and materials would have been, and eventually, and now has a honorary PhD from Oxford, because she was like, they're like, yeah, you're right, you know what you're talking about. And then I've got, you know, kind of a discussion of how wraps would work and ways to put them on. Again, if anybody has questions, go ahead. So again, colors: red, yellow, brown, green, yellow, blue, and purple. Although as you get into the Roman period, imperial purple is restricted. Again, if you really want to get into the weeds of making it Roman, black is basically literally you walk around wearing black and people are like, dude, who died? Like, black is for mourning, black is for funerals. Can I make it out of a sari? Yes. But you'll need to cut off the palu, which is the fancy part at the end, and the borders. And you want to be looking for kind of like small, evenly spaced repeats if it does have a pattern. Let's see. And then Phoenician, modus punicus gerendus est, which is my little pun because it means punic clothing, that is the clothing of Phoenicia, the clothing of Carthage, must be worn. After there was a Roman orator who would end all of his speeches with Carthage delenda est, which is Carthage must be destroyed. Carthage itself and the Phoenician culture were mainly concentrated in kind of like North Africa. So like what's now Tunisia, Lebanon. You had these sort of, you had Carthage proper, and then you had these sort of like culturally very similar cities. And you also had kind of hybrid like Spanish Phoenician cultures going on in Spain, which I think are super interesting. Um, and men wore, again, not a ton of jewelry, mainly finger rings and earrings. Um, Earrings were actually like a really important, like hoop earrings on men were like a really important uh, Carthaginian cultural marker, to the point that we actually have Roman literature where people are like making fun of Carthaginians by going, "Hey, those go on your fingers." um, and the most distinctive feature of Phoenician necklaces is the use of glass beads, particularly with animal or human head shapes or in the shape of an animal. And these could be big, like 25 millimeters, so like an inch around.
Wow, very cool.
Yes, super cool. Um, Good Girl Gone Bead makes them. I have a list of suppliers at the end. And yeah, so that's just kind of one of those things, just like go nuts. You have the classic Phoenician um Phrygian cap, and then you
I'm
all,
curious, when you go back to that cap, we're seeing
yeah,
curves now instead of rectangles. So I always wonder at what point a culture goes from rectangles and squares to curves and or to triangles, because that means there's got to be a scissor or a knife that is being used in textiles, because there are some places that don't go through an iron age. Their clothing never stops being rectangular because they just learn to weave to a shape.
okay. Uh, okay, the answer to that is that the first scissors that we know about were show up archaeologically in Egypt in about 1800 BCE.
Okay. Are they using a scissor type or a knife tip typed
Uh,
implement in order to get these curves?
Um, I don't know. Um,
Oh,
I
something to find out. Rabbit hole, rabbit hole.
Yeah. By the time the Phoenicians were around, and were like prominent as a culture, scissors were a thing.
Okay.
So it could, and you can see that's not a very complex cut.
No, no. But
Right.
it's the first time I always start to think what other things are going into textile production other than just weaving in straight lines.
Right. Yeah. So with the Phoenicians, the pretty much the only place that you see anything other than straight lines are like on these sewn caps, which are a fairly small accessory.
Oh. Thanks for
So
indulging my question on that.
no, that's why I'm here. Okay, and then you also see this kind of kerchief, which is worn either on its own or as an undercap with the Phrygian cap. Belts, no belts, which is actually another one of the really distinctive features of Carthaginian clothing, is it just hangs down straight, right? And having made an outfit and worn it, it's like it's amazing just how having this like cloth like billowing around you and you've got this really long veil on. because that was a mark of like, that was another mark of like Carthaginian women, at least for like formal occasions. They would wear these like giant, like floor length veils that were just like, you know, when you put them on, it's just like you feel imposing. Like you are there, you are taking up space, you are important, right?
Nice.
You know, even though I was wearing like gray wool and like a brown cotton sari veil, but you know, it didn't matter. It wasn't about the materials.
Riches of the drapery.
Right, exactly. Um, so can you make it out of a sari? Yes, you'll need to take off the palu, and the borders you can cut off or leave in place. They're also really ideal for the like the mantle over the head that I was just describing. Because they're light, and if you get one that's made out of cotton, it's pretty grippy on your hair. Um, and then we come to Egyptian. Linen is cool. So is cotton. And then so you can have a bag tunic with a keyhole neckline. You also, and I need to update my handout on this as I've been doing more research. You can also have a vertical slit down the front, or like very, very late, like um basically like just before the Greeks take over, you start seeing horizontal slits instead of keyhole necklines. Jewelry, just go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and have fun. You know, like I could do like a 4-hour class just on Egyptian jewelry.
I think several people would sign up for that.
Yeah, exactly. But I would also first need to do the research. Now, for wigs, a lot of Egyptians did in fact wear wigs. In addition to the rounded square or square headdress, like the one that I included for the Phoenician example. In fact, the example that I have is actually a New Kingdom one that was found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. But you can tell just by looking at the Phoenician stuff that it's the same, like it has to be the same thing because it looks like the same thing, just made a little bit smaller. I will say my only word on wigs, you know, is to be aware in the modern world that, you know, yes, you look at Egyptian art and you look at surviving wigs, and a lot of them are designed to look good on people with um you know, typically African hair textures. um and you know, they're because, and my personal feeling is that because there are a lot of you know, sort of modern politics that are centered around the you know, the you know, appropriateness of black hairstyles, that I personally feel more comfortable wearing a wig that has the right shape. This is actually my Egyptian wig that has the right shape,
Uh-huh.
but has my natural hair but has the same color and texture as my natural hair.
Makes sense.
That's what, you know, like that's what I personally feel like is the best way to approach it. As somebody who, was not blessed with naturally curly hair, kind of as we wear this in the modern world. But if do have, but also though people should, if you have the right hair texture, feel free to celebrate that because that's what's going on. Belts, you kind of like, you'll see, I'm going to delete no belts because I found enough data that I'm no longer comfortable saying that, but like rarely you see a decorative sash worn, but my best guess is that belting includes airflow. For wraps, honestly, the most common thing is just a like big old rectangle of fabric wrapped around your shoulders. And with Egyptian stuff, one of the most common features is that it was typically made out of undyed linen or cotton. Red, blue, green, and yellow appear but aren't super common, and stripes, especially horizontal stripes, are something that you start seeing in pattern fabric, kind of like in the New Kingdom. So like you're thinking like King Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, like that kind of period is where things start showing up. And can I make it out of a sorry? Sorry, not sorry. However, if you want one of your if you want to do a New Kingdom striped bag tunic, um a a couple of Turkish towels are definitely the way to go, especially since they had fringes at the bottom, which was also a really common feature. And then we've got my bibliography. I mention if you get interested in Egyptian clothing, you have Pharaonic Egyptian Clothing by Gillian Vogelsang Eastwood, which is really, really good. And you can get it for free on archive.org via Brill. And then I have and then I also have a list of recommended suppliers.
Nice, nice.
So that's all I have. I'm going to stop screen sharing. We've got, it looks like about 8 minutes left for questions. So if anybody has questions, let me know.
Aurelia,
Oh, oh yeah, link to the handout. I'm sorry. I said I was going to do that and I'm not. Okay, so
You are now prepared to. And then I'll make
yeah,
sure that in the recording I share the viewable link in the description in the
yeah.
YouTube, just in case.
Okay,
So
thanks.
see the description below.
Yes. Find your thing in the show notes. Okay. No, I'm okay.
Grace, if you have any photo albums that you share at all of some of the pieces that you've worn or made or had other people wearing?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I had planned on updating my handout and then there was life. Anyway, but now you have a link to the handout in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions?
What is the thing you wish you had known first that you figured out over the years that has been the best trick?
Um, Probably the best trick I have learned over the years is always to research before sewing and to make a prototype that is like other than being my measurements is done the way that the extant garment is done because 9 times out of 10 it was done like that for a reason.
Very good point. Does anyone else have any other questions, comments, thoughts? Are you feeling inspired? Are you planning to make things? I see lots of smiles, noddings of head, people
Okay.
reaching for their keyboards.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
Um,
you so much.
This is
Okay.
great.
Thanks for teaching. It was really great.
Thank you. And I'm going to leave now. Everyone have a good night. And if you have any further questions or just want to chat, please just hit me up at my email.
Outstanding. Well, we really appreciate you. Thank you so much and have a lovely evening.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.